Yes, this video is about a book, but it is a gaming book, and I really enjoyed it. Alright everyone, hope you're doing well. Thanks for pressing play once again. I am the man they call Pixel Paul, and like I said at the start of the video, this video is all about a book. I've read a book. Why? Well, it's a long story. Well, it's not a long story, but it's a strange story. It's not even a strange story either. It's just a story. Basically, I was messaged on Instagram. So many of you will know that I have an Instagram account. And I just post loads of pictures of games and that sort of thing, really. And I was approached about 2 months ago, something like that, from like a PR company. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the PR company, but it was like a PR company. And they asked me if I'd be interested in receiving a copy of a specific book. And, no, it was free of charge as well. They put me under sort of no pressure to kind of do any like social media of it. They kind of mentioned social media and the Instagram account and what have you. But certainly put me under no pressure to do it. So, yeah, I was a little bit skeptical of it. But it turned up about 2 weeks ago, to my surprise. And I was absolutely chuffed, actually, to get it. What is the book? Well, of course, it is The Perfect Game from Russia with Love by Henk Rogers. So, who is Henk Rogers? Well, some of you may know, some of you may not. Henk Rogers is essentially the guy who was responsible for Tetris becoming the huge success that it was in a way. Obviously, he didn't sort of develop the game initially. That was developed by a Russian, I think he was a mathematician and programmer called Alexei Pachibov. I think that's how you pronounce it. But he discovered or found Tetris being sort of demoed at like a it was an electronics convention in Las Vegas in the late 80s or mid 80s. And he sort of saw Tetris and saw its potential and was immediately sort of hooked on it and made it his kind of goal to ensure that sort of Tetris game was bigger than it was at that point. Because at that time, it was just going to be a game that you could, not even sort of be sold. It was probably going to just be passed from universities and that sort of thing, and maybe even just forgotten, which would have been incredibly sad, really, because we all know and love what Tetris became. So, the story of Henk Rogers, The Perfect Game. Before I get into the book itself, what I don't want to do here is give you the impression that this is going to be some sort of review, because I've never reviewed a book in my life. I'm not a huge reader. I have read books, but I'm not a huge reader. I just don't have the time and usually don't have the patience. It has to be a really good book for, to keep me interested and to keep me motivated to get to the end. So I don't really know how to review or critique a book. So this is very much just going to be my sort of like just how much I enjoyed it and thoughts on it. I honestly can't recommend it enough. If you are a fan of gaming, if you're a fan of Tetris, then this book will keep you hooked. It genuinely will. If you're not a fan of gaming and Tetris, to be honest, if you are a fan of, entrepreneurship, is that the word? And Neil, I think I said that right. And even maybe elements of like what, Russia was like in the sort of mid 90s as well. There's a lot going on in this story, and it's such an amazing story. Now, obviously, there has been the Tetris movie as well. Now, the Tetris movie, if you were like me, when it first got announced, you were probably sort of approaching that with a little bit of trepidation and dread, because I personally thought when they said Tetris movie, I was imagining it was going to be some sort of kids animated movie with talking blocks going on some sort of Tetris adventure, and it filled me with horror. And thankfully, it wasn't. It was, a story based on Henk Rogers' life and his quest to get Tetris published. And apparently it's a really good film. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of differences between the film and this book, I think, because the film has to be catered to or changed slightly to a different kind of audience. It's a movie-going audience, and it's a visual piece of entertainment as well. Whereas the book is very much, everything that Henk went through, his experience. And I'm sort of glad that I read the book first. I do still want to watch the film, but I think knowing Henk's first-hand story has just made me realise just how incredible, his story is, really. To give you a bit of background on, or an early introduction into the book, I'll read the prologue to you just because that basically covers a lot of who and how sort of Henk and his story began. So the prologue is, my name is Henk Rogers. I was born in the Netherlands, grew up in New York City and surfed Hawaii, studied computer science, played Dungeons and Dragons, and I chased a girl to Japan. I became a computer game developer when personal computers first came on the Japanese market. I started a company, published my own game, and became a publisher of other people's games. One day I found a little puzzle game called Tetris at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, and this is my story. So that's a good intro to, it covers a lot of things there. His early childhood is fascinating, really, because, like he mentions there, he was born he was born Dutch. He lived in New York City. And then he sort of moved to Japan as well. He spent so much time in Japan, and that kind of shaped his whole career, I guess, in a way. As it mentioned there, he sort of became a game developer as well, and produced his own game, The Black Onyx, which was an RPG game. Which strangely at the time, RPGs weren't particularly big in Japan. I think, if I remember right, it said Square was one of the sort of early developers over there, and they did a different sort of kind of RPG, whereas the Black Onyx was very much it's a different type of RPG that the Japanese market weren't particularly aware of or had played before. So it was a big gamble, a big risk, but again, he sort of had or saw the potential of that game, and it was his game that he developed, and he pushed for it to get promoted and released and published, and it became such a huge seller for him as well. So already you sort of get the you get the idea that of just how sort of driven he is and or was back then, and how he still is to this day as well, with different projects as well. So yeah, that's his early life. He had a huge sort of family. He's got, I'm hoping I've got this right, I think it's about 15 siblings, something like that as well. So he had a massive family, some who were sort of like involved with his early jobs, and I think some of them helped out with some of the later parts of the Tetris negotiations as well. So his family was sort of involved as well. But yeah, all of it mainly off his own back. There were moments in the book where where he goes over to Russia, and the Russian part of the story is probably just like the main act, if you like. That's what I would sort of explain it as. How he describes when he went over there and when he got there. It kind of just shows just how driven he really is, and how driven he was then, and how much faith he had in the game Tetris to get that over the line, because it sounded absolutely horrific. And I know when I was reading it, I was sort of thinking, God, if that was me, I think as soon as I stepped off the airplane, I think I probably would have given up at that point, because it sounded absolutely horrendous. And again, this is sort of like Russia in the sort of mid early 90s. Well, no, sorry, it'd be the late 80s, before the Game Boy came out. So yeah, the actual sort of Russia part of the story, and meeting Alexei as well. And it's fascinating to sort of get a feel for the guy who actually made Tetris as well, because he sort of talks about him, and they are still good friends to this day as well. It's interesting to sort of get a little bit of story about him as well. And what I quite liked about the book too is the fact that Alexei has kind of included little snippets of his own sort of point of view, just very sort of brief little paragraphs included into various pages of the book, particularly around the Russian parts, just giving his point of view on things as well. So having his input into this book as well just helps sort of flesh out different points of view from it as well. And most of the time they actually are completely spot on and completely on the same page. So yeah, fascinating stuff. Another thing that I really liked about the book as well, obviously, it's going to different countries and lots of different sort of languages and cultures. The sort of Russian part of it, again, has kind of given me an idea of, what is actually sort of going on in the world now, where Russia was then, where it went, and where it's kind of maybe going back to now. I had no idea really about Russia, particularly, and the sort of lay of the land and the politics and everything. But I kind of get it now, and that's through reading this book. And there's also quite a lot of Japanese terms and Japanese words that are used throughout the book as well. And again, Henk is included explanations. So any kind of word that is Japanese, he includes like a little separate subtext almost of explanations of what Japanese words mean and what different sort of traditions and customs they have. So it's fascinating stuff, from that point of view as well, not just from sort of Tetris side of things. Just the whole it's kind of educated me a little bit on some of the sort of Japanese terms and customs. So yeah, that's kind of a bonus with the book, really. So Tetris itself, for me, is such a big game because I think I've said this on videos before. Tetris was my sort of first video game, really. I got it with my very first Nintendo console, the Game Boy, of course. And I absolutely adore the game. I just think it's such an incredible game. When I first got the Game Boy, it was a case of, right, I've got Tetris, that's all I need for the next few months. And genuinely, I had it for about 3, 4, 5 months, something like that, before I got the next game for it. And the next game was Super Mario Land. And it's interesting because in the book, it's almost like I think it was included in the film as well, but, when Henk first saw the Game Boy, when it was first sort of shown to him by Nintendo, and they said that they were planning to pack it with Super Mario Land, his words were, if you sell the Game Boy with Super Mario Land, you will sell units to little boys. But if you pack it with Tetris, you'll sell it to everyone. How can you argue with that? And he was absolutely right, really, because Super Mario Land would have sold anyway. But packing it with Tetris was just absolutely perfect. It was absolutely genius, really. An inspired move, and it helped Tetris and the Game Boy become huge successes. So I thought, just to show how much I do love Tetris, I thought I'd just go quickly through the games, the copies of Tetris that I have. And there are so many different versions of Tetris as well these days. I went through, I was looking online and I must have counted at least sort of 50 different versions, mobile phone versions of it as well. There's just so many different versions of it. But that's the beauty of it. It's such a, I don't want to say easy game to translate, but it's a game that you can play almost on any device. It's a bit, it's a bit like Doom in a way. You've heard of people playing Doom on refrigerators and things like that. But yeah, I can imagine Tetris is probably a game that you could just transfer to anything and anyone can play it. But anyway, I'll show you the games that I've got, the Tetris games. So I have Tetris DS. I also have the next Tetris on PlayStation. I've got Tetris DX on the Color Game Boy. Tetris Worlds on the PlayStation 2. I've also got Tetris 2 on the Xbox One. That also comes with Puyo Puyo on it. But yeah, Tetris 2. I've got another copy of Tetris Worlds on the Xbox. Tetris Party Deluxe. Now, admittedly, I've not tried this one yet. I've had this for ages, but I've not tried Tetris Party on the Wii. But yeah, another version of it. And then probably, I would say this is my second favourite version of Tetris already, behind the original version. And I've only played this in the last year and I got hooked on this. I thought it was absolutely amazing. It's just a new way to play Tetris. Tetris Effect, PlayStation 4, but also in PlayStation VR. And I just loved it in VR. I just think it's amazing just to be able to play Tetris with everything sort of going on around you. It's a real sort of experience, so thoroughly recommend that version of it if you can ever get to play it. And then there is, of course, the very original version of Tetris on the Game Boy, and that's my original copy from my original Game Boy as well. And I can't tell you how many times I've played it. Tetris is a little bit like my comfort game. If I don't know what to play, or if I've got a spare 5-10 minutes, I will usually go to Tetris. I can just pick it up and play it, and yeah, I just love it. And I always remember Tetris from my days at high school as well. So I remember going into school with my Game Boy and Tetris and sort of playing it. I think we must have had some sort of, like, I don't know, break day or something like that, where you could take your toys into school or something like that. And I took my Game Boy in Tetris. And I remember at the time my sort of highest score, and we always did sort of scores based on how many lines you've done, and that sounds a bit weird, how many lines you created in Tetris. And I think at the time mine was something like 304. I don't know whether that's good or bad these days, I'm not sure, probably terrible, but it was about 304. And I remember a lad in my class he was quite sort of like the popular lad, quite the good looking, got all the girls used to quite like him, but he was always dead popular, he was always dead good at everything. And he played on my copy of Tetris, and he got a score of 391 lines, and I was absolutely devastated that he'd sort of absolutely smashed my own personal record. Couldn't believe it, really. He just picked it up and got 391 lines just like that, and I was like, oof. So he gave it me back, and I started to play it again. And about 20 minutes later, maybe a bit longer, something like that, I was determined to beat his score, and it was great. It was a great feeling going back over to him, showing him the screen and going 396. And the look of absolute kind of disappointment in his face. Yeah, bit of a highlight, that one. I do remember that from high school. One of the few things I remember from high school. But yeah, that's just one of those gaming stories that stayed with me forever. And, it's all thanks to Tetris. And again, all thanks to, in part, Henk Rogers. So back to the book. And yeah, I did, I think I've said it before, but I thoroughly enjoyed this book. It's just an incredible journey from, his early childhood, his sort of various roles and jobs that he had throughout his early life, and moving into the world of sort of programming and developing, to discovering Tetris, to going to Russia and getting handheld rights to Tetris, and to so Nintendo could release it with the Game Boy, and then moving on from Tetris. I mean, Tetris kind of, it didn't just stop once the Game Boy version came out. You've seen how many different versions of Tetris there are as well. So he was involved with, and his companies were involved with, and it was Bulletproof Software was his initial company, that helped sort of publish Tetris. He then sort of had a hand in various different aspects and different versions of Tetris too, and a lot of his sort of stamp on the game is still in there now, and it's quite sort of, although he didn't sort of create Tetris, it feels like he sort of evolved it a little bit from where it was originally. So he should take a lot of credit for where the sort of the game went in a way, and helped it again to become the success that it was. But yeah, once he'd sort of done the whole side of Tetris as well, he moved on to different sort of ventures and different companies, and there was the ongoing saga of rights and that sort of thing as well. Some of the business terms and things like that, I'm not 100% sure on, but it's written in a way that you can sort of not necessarily be the expert in business or entrepreneurship, but and still understand what's going on. But yeah, it's a fascinating sort of story, and the legal ramblings as well, just incredible what they had to go through, with some of the Russian authorities and Russian publishing houses and software companies. So yeah, it's kind of hard to explain some of it. You really genuinely have to read it and get into the groove of reading it, because once you sort of understand, or you've read a lot of the book, you start to get into the groove of understanding some of the terms and things like that. It's hard to explain in a way, but yeah, it just moves on then from after Tetris. He has a bit of a kind of life-changing medical moment, if you like, and that kind of shifted gears, made him sort of shift gears a little bit, to the point where now he is completely sort of focused on his new sort of venture, which is the Blue Planet Alliance, which is all about like renewable fuels and that sort of thing. And there was a little leaflet included with the booklet as well, so there you go, show you that, about Blue Planet Alliance. And all the proceeds from the sales of this book are going to the non-profit organisation Blue Planet Alliance. So that's nice as well, that he sort of made that his next kind of goal in life. He obviously cannot stop, no matter what kind of medical emergencies he's had. So yeah, it's fair play to him, trying to sort of get the or fighting climate change, I should say. One other bonus with the book as well that I got sent, and I was really surprised when I opened it up and saw this as well, is that he actually signed it for me too. So there you go, to Paul, play Tetris, signed by Henk. So I thought that was a nice touch as well. So I was really chuffed with that. And what a fantastic sort of piece of gaming history in one book to have. I must mention as well, the front kind of cover is a lenticular sleeve, and I love lenticular sleeves as well on games. So immediately I was, as soon as I opened the package and saw the cover was a bit lenticular, and yeah, I was thinking, yeah, I'm onto a winner with this one. I like the look of it. So yeah, I've completely gone off cuff. I've gone off the rails a little bit with that. I just don't know how to explain a book to people without spoiling it too much. It's difficult in a way. Games I can talk about. I talk about really easily and not be able to spoil them. So books are a little bit different. How much do you give away? How much do you give as a sort of taster of it? I'm not sure, but I'm hoping I've maybe tempted you to think about having a look at the book, or maybe even go and watching the film. Because it's an amazing book, an amazing read. I really enjoyed it. Kind of flew through reading it. I thought it was going to take me a little bit longer to read, but to be honest, it didn't. So yeah, I thoroughly recommend it. Give it a look. So I will say sorry once again, because I do feel like I've just rambled my way through that talk about the book itself. But yeah, again, I really enjoyed it, and yeah, thoroughly recommended. So if you've not already got it, or if you've not already watched the film, it's just a story that you need to know. I think as gamers, it's a story that you need to know, and it must be read. So do. If you've already read the book, let me know in the comments. I'd love to know what you thought of it. And if you've seen the film, again, let me know what you thought of the film in comparison to the book, perhaps. Be interested to know, because I do want to watch that at some point. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my weird ramblings and poorly presented review of the book. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.